What if I told you that you can actually feel richer driving a second-hand car than you can a new one? In this video, I'm going to actually show you the insane math that proves once and for all that buying a new car is financial suicide. But if you've already got a new car, don't feel bad, because I'm going to show you over the lifetime that you have on this beautiful earth of buying new cars, how changing to buying a second-hand car at any point is going to be an awesome decision. Better than that, I'm going to show you how when you get into the car that you are going to buy in the future, your second-hand one, you'll actually feel richer. If that sounds good to you, let's get stuck into it. I'll show you on my computer what I mean. So guys, here we have the cost of new car smell. So yeah, it smells amazing. I don't know why. I guess it's all of the bombardment of advertisements we've had since we were young children about how a new car can give you all this life and youth, and we've attached that with deep needs within us. So it's a huge thing. Getting the latest technology, having warranty, and just the status symbol of having a new car are huge things. The problem is this chart. As soon as you drive off the lot, you lose around 10% of the value of the car. So the instant you drive out, and of course in the first year, you've lost 20%, and then 15% for the next 4 years after that. So by the time 5 years comes around, you have effectively lost 60% of the value of this car, and it's only worth 40% of what you paid for it. So if you bought a car worth $40,000, it'll only be worth $16,000 by the time 5 years comes around. But in this destruction of wealth is a beautiful opportunity, because secondhand cars that are between 3 and let's say 7 years old are potentially still excellent cars. And I'll talk about some of the details behind that. First, I want to mention a book that I read many years ago. I've actually got a copy of it sitting in my cupboard, and it is possibly one of the most fantastic books that I've ever read. And in The Millionaire Mind, Thomas Stanley talks about millionaires and the types of cars they buy. And this kind of surprised me at the time, to be honest. And now as I've gotten older, it was probably 20 years ago when I read that book, and I've owned secondhand car after secondhand car, and I've never bought a new car, and I've never bought a car with a loan or a lease. I realize the truth behind what he says. He says that millionaires prioritize value and long-term cost effectiveness over buying a flashy status symbol. And I'll never forget, I lived in Sydney, right on the harbour, in this beautiful apartment, and we lived next door to a gynecologist, and he had, I swear it's probably worth maybe 30 or 40 million, the home now, because it was worth many millions 20 years ago. And he used to go to work in this beat up old Toyota, and I used to think to myself, wow, okay, there's something in this, you know? Why isn't he going to work in a Porsche? In any case, it did make me think that there is some truth to what The Millionaire Mind talks about. And rich people also hold on to cars longer because they're really thinking about cars in terms of an investment. You know, how can I maximize this car's life and enjoy it? And how can I then, with that money that I've saved, how can I invest? And millionaires buy cars with cash, and that'll become abundantly clear when I show you the math. I've got 3 guys here, Mike, Steve, and James. And Mike bought a car for 50 grand, brand new. Steve and James bought their cars for 20 grand, used. And Mike got a loan, and so did Steve. James just bought his car in cash. And this table here shows the the loan term, this is the average loan term of an American at the moment. It's about 5.5 years. So you can possibly relate to that if you've got a loan. And here's the monthly payments for a new car and a used car. You can possibly relate to that as well. And I've used 7%, which is roughly what a lot of people are paying for loans at the moment. Total payment for Mike, $59,835. And well, Steve's far better off he's far better off just having bought a second-hand car, but he used a loan because he didn't have the cash. James, of course, paid cash up front. And you can see the differences here between how much they end up paying over the life of those loans. So what I've done is I've taken the difference between James and Mike and figured out, let's say James and Mike are 20 years old, and James invests the savings he made. That 39,000 becomes 1.8 million. And this is kind of mind-blowing, but it gets kind of crazier when you consider that people may buy one car in their 20s and replace that car every 10 years. And let's have a look at what happens there. Now, I just want to be really realistic with you guys. 10% is what you would earn on the stock exchange. You know, the S&P's average return for the last however many decades has been roughly around 10%. But I've made this 7% because I wanted to take out inflation. So I wanted to look at what you would potentially be saving in today's dollars. So I've used roughly 3%. I wanted to see using 7%, which is far, far more realistic, I think, in terms of how much money you would have in today's dollars. So first car was purchased when this person was 20 years old, and they saved $596,000. Then they met a significant other and they started buying two cars. And so at age 30, they bought two cars and they invested that at age 40. And you can see the numbers here. And they bought another two cars at age 40. So they're replacing these cars every 10 years. Then they are investing it 10 years later. And the reason why I'm investing it 10 years later is because it's the money that they've saved over those 10 years. So this number is very conservative. I've used 7% and I've also left 10 years of buffer to invest the money. So this could be far, far higher. But honestly, it doesn't even look real when you use those numbers. When you use 10% and you invest the money straight away, as if you had the cash, the extra 39,000 cash ready to go, which this becomes like many millions. And so, yeah, I've just used a really conservative number. Most people have nowhere near this amount to retire on. And I hear you saying, yeah, Quinn, but I really want a car that I love. I want that new car smell. I want the latest technology. I want the safety feature. I want the warranty. I don't want to worry. And I want the status symbol that goes on that. But what if I told you that you really can love a second-hand car more than a new car? And the reason is, with a new car, you're going to take it to the dealer to get it worked on, to get it maintained, because you're going to be too scared to mess something up. But with a second-hand car, you can do some basic maintenance yourself. And I'm talking like oil change. That's pretty much all I've been doing to my cars for the last few decades. I've started getting a little bit more adventurous and changing other things and doing other things, but you know, like brake pads and transmission oil and things like that. And I've found that they're really easy. You just grab a YouTube video on your car and it's all there for you. And something incredible happens, guys, that I really wanted to share with you. It's called the IKEA effect. And it's this effect that when you build something yourself with your own hands, that it means more to you. And it's the same with a car. Even if you have no technical ability and you have no desire to work on a car at all, I would fully encourage you to just, start doing little things like just checking the oil and maybe changing the wiper blades, but do these little things that make you feel like you have an invested interest in this car. And when you drive it, I guarantee that you will feel more joy when you drive this car. But it gets better. You can also do things like accessorize. So in my case, I actually added an awning to the side of my four-wheel drive. And when we went camping recently, we were able to pop out the awning, and yeah, it feels awesome. And I see it every time I go and jump in the car. I see it on the side there. It just makes the car look a bit more utilitarian, a bit more rugged. I've also recently updated the car's head unit. So it had this really basic kind of stereo with a really shitty kind of reverse camera. You can hardly see the image. The maps required that you needed a subscription, which had long expired, so the maps didn't really work for the navigation. The audio was horrendous. I couldn't do anything really with this thing. It was bad. And honestly, it was one of the best things I ever did. When we had a recent road trip, we listened to an audiobook which I downloaded through Google Apps, and yeah, it came through the speakers in the car instead of having our phone in the middle trying to blare out the audiobook. So how much do you spend on a car? Well, here's where the 25% rule and the 15% rules for buying a car apply. The 25% rule suggests that the total cost of owning a car, purchase price, loan, insurance, maintenance, should not exceed 25% of your annual income. So that's pretty easy to figure out, right? And I think this is about right. There is also a 35% rule, but I prefer this 25% rule. But, you know, this is rules that financial advisors give and other people. And quite honestly, you should follow the rules that work for you. But I would use this as a maximum, 25%. And if you really love your cars and then you're buying it in cash, you're miles ahead. You can probably do, in fact, I go below this even. I buy the best car I can that meets my needs for the least possible cost. And so here's some calculations for you. $80,000 salary or annual income times 0.25, which is 25% obviously, equals 20,000. And this includes your loan interest, insurance and maintenance. Obviously if you buy cash, the loan interest is not going to exist. And if you're financing, this is the 15% rule. It's not supposed to exceed 15% of monthly income. And, you know, quite honestly, if getting a loan is the only way you can get a car, well, I'd rethink that if I could. But you know, some people need a car to get their kids to school and things like that, and they just don't have the cash. So, you know, financing may be the only way you can go to make that happen in the short term. But realize that cash is the way you should be going in the future, and start to set aside money going forward, because I just wouldn't buy a car if it didn't have the cash. It's that simple. I'd buy a shittier car. So as I alluded to before, people buying new cars and their depreciation rapidly is the opportunity for you in terms of buying a second-hand car. And so it's really a sweet spot that I think you can find. It comes down to these factors here that you need to look at to decide, okay, what's the right car for me? Most people, and I'm actually replacing our second car, the other car that we have, which is a Subaru Forester, 2011. At the moment, it's 14 years old and it's starting to get maintenance issues. It's had hardly any issues at all until recently, and now it's starting to show its age, and so it's time to move on that car. The thing is, my wife, she only cares about the color of the car and how it looks. She doesn't like these new cars that look angry, and all of them kind of look aggressive and angry. And I kind of agree, but I don't really care about the color or the way it looks so much as, how long is it going to last? How easy is it to do maintenance? You know, can I easily change the oil? For most other things, I'll probably take it to the shop, but it probably won't need most other things anyway. So going back to what millionaires do, they buy in cash. If they don't have the cash, or you don't have the cash, I'd just get a shit car and use a newer car as motivation. I'd put a photo of a newer car on my wall and just make that part of my savings goals. I'd always have an emergency fund before I would have a car fund, by the way. And millionaires also buy cars that last a long time. So really the lesson here is that to buy a car is not to start with the color and the way it looks, but to start with what mechanics think. And there's some great videos online of trustable mechanics that can point you in the direction of cars that are reliable. Scotty Kilmer is one that I really like. He's an American guy that he's a mechanic. He knows cars. Start with the mechanics, and then once you've got a short list, then you can figure out the one you like, the look of the best. And the beauty of secondhand cars is you can often get all the features that you want for a huge discount. And quite often I never buy the base model cars. I always buy cars that have got a bit of luxury built into them, because quite honestly they are the best value for money in my view. So some buying tips and hacks. Well, the vehicle history report is pretty important. And in the US, they call it Carfax. In Canada, it's called Carfax as well, spelled F-A-X. And Australia, it's called Carfax. And UK, it's MOT. Essentially, what it does is it looks at a database of potential issues. So, you know, if it's ever been stolen, then it's likely to show up. And if it's had any major repair, then repairers are obliged to report it. And so it will show up in this. It's not foolproof, but it can certainly go a long way to making sure you end up with a better car. I like to research common issues before I go and inspect a car. So just knowing exactly what to look for. So you open the bonnet, you can look for certain oil leaks and certain things when you're driving the car. And I'm not a mechanic, but having these things in your mind when you go to look at the car, and I take a little piece of paper, usually kind of a checklist of things I want to remember to have a look at, and just, yeah, it puts me miles ahead, because I know what to look for, and I do as thorough inspection as possible. But what you probably should do if you don't have much mechanical ability is get a pre-purchase inspection. You just pay a mechanic to basically go through the car and check it all out. A bit of an insurance policy on making sure that you get a good car. I've personally I've never done that, and it's worked out just fine. Maybe I got a bit lucky, but also I feel like you can spend a lot of time getting things checked out, but at the end of the day, you know, you can tell a lot from just meeting with the person that you're buying it from, and you can see if they're the type of person that's looked after the car. And obviously always check the maintenance records, and if they've missed maintenance records, that's a big red flag. And I usually just walk away from cars that don't have, they rarely have perfect maintenance records. You can get away with a little bit of that. But at the end of the day, the more you've got of good maintenance, especially just changing the oil on a regular basis, then the better that car's going to be. And if it's been maintained by the dealer, then they tend to go through a lot of other things in the car, a lot of things that the car might need but aren't obvious to a third-party mechanic, let's say, that might just do an oil change. So yeah, it can be good to see the dealer stamp on there, but I wouldn't unduly worry if that's not on there, as long as the oil's been changed regularly. And you know, some of the other major things, if it's a higher mileage car, you might want to look at, you know, things like the drive belt and other things that are required. But I tend to go for cars that are ideally less than about 100,000 Ks, which is 60,000 miles. So that's usually not an issue. It's usually just, you know, basic oil changes and a few other little things to make sure the car's running fine by that point. Going forward, when you own the car, if you're just doing maintenance yourself, I quite often take my cars to a mechanic and just get a full inspection and find out what some of the other potential issues are, or what the maintenance that I might need to do is. And I usually follow the manufacturer's schedule for maintenance as well, and I find that really helpful. So guys, hope you found this helpful. Hope that you buy a second-hand car for your next car and start to do a little bit of work yourself on the car, and just start to, you know, even just to feel a little bit more affinity for the car, whether that's just some basic upgrades or, you know, some of the maintenance, like I said. Guys, I hope you found this helpful. Look forward to seeing you again soon.